Hi, and welcome to Yeshiva Shem. I'm Rabbi David Katz. This is the Ger series, Ger number 17. The topic for the class will be the Gared Tzedic with a deeper outlook. Questions, comments, or feedback, I can be reached at Rabbi Katz at virtualyeshiva.com. And this is our last class until the month of Cheshvan. So we've had a nice run, and we're going to go into the month of Tishrei. All the holidays come out on class night, so that's what's keeping the class at bay. And hopefully the holidays of the New Year and Assad will inspire interesting new developments in Cheshvan, assuming there still is an Assad in Syria and all the situations happening. So the point being, lots of things are going on in this part of the world. We'll see what transpires, both spiritually and physically. It could be a very new situation on either front by the time Cheshvan rolls around. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure. But it certainly is a reality. Okay. Gared Tzedic. Who is this guy? Where is he coming from? We all know the controversy with the term. And now we're coming to clarify this term and make sense of this equation. The term Gared Tzedic, as we all know, has largely, in the past, let's say, 100 years, been used to describe a convert to Judaism. But this was not always the case. We know, as far back as the Talmud, the Gared Tzedic is a term for simply what it means, a righteous ger. A ger is somebody, that is most probably in the Torah. We know most times it comes out of Ger Toshav. Somebody who's come from afar to dwell in the midst of an Israel entity. Whether it be the land of Israel or the people of Israel abroad, you would then be a ger. The term Toshav comes to imply that you may dwell amongst the Jews, not so much as permission, just that it's accepted, it's understood, it's part of the territory. It comes with being a Jew. There are going to be gerim around. And that, in fact, that question was asked during the week, and what it means is that all through Jewish history, whether in the land or abroad, there have always been gerim in proximity with Jews. It's the fabric of reality. Reality is composed of these two peoples. You can say there's two kinds of people in this world, right? Male and female. There's also two kinds of people in this world, gerim and Jews. And they are just as intertwined as male-female. When the ger takes on more mitzvot, as it's brought down in his connection with Shabbat, Yevamos 40b, our famous Talmudic source, based on the 10 Commandments, the ger in your gate will rest them with you. When the ger takes on mitzvot, he has the label tzedek. He is taking on more than 7 laws of Noah. Now that's the basic definition. Rebi Nachman, we'll be getting into his Torah because of his work on gerim. It is so. Rebi Nachman, his Torah is largely built on ger Torah. That the sum parts of his work is to the necessity of having gerim. And when you read through his Torah, you see that and this is what the class is going to be about tonight, that he is not and cannot be talking about converts. in a total sense. The converts are part of the equation, as is Jews and every other part of the holy team. But what he's saying is, we'll see inside, the classic Gerim are a major part of his conception of what is the essential Judaism and service of God. The basic premise of Rebi Nachman, basic premise of Gerim, or Gared Tzedic, is the definition working off of Rashi. Rashi says a ger is somebody who leaves his origin and comes to settle in a new domain. If you've done that, you are a ger. Rebi Nachman then adds to this, a Ger Tzedek is somebody who has come from very far and has made an effort to continuously walk towards the inner sanctum of holiness with the guidance of the divine presence. If you consider yourself having been placed very far and you have returned, you've turned around and you are headed to the Holy of Holies and you feel God is aiding you, you are 100% a Ger Tzedek. Then there's the convert. The convert is also a Ger Tzedek. But Rebi Nachman brings you the comparison of the Bal Teshuvah, the Jewish returnee. Now, I guess I can use myself for an example. I am a rabbi, and I'm a Bal Teshuvah. I was in yeshiva for over 10 years. And I very much feel like a Bal Teshuvah. I mean, when I see the thing, my interests, my lifestyle, it does not resonate as one who is religious from birth. I mean, I still have things that I like from the old days. Let's say musical interest, clothing, attire, family connections, friends of old. I'm not what you would call a from birth Jew. There's a difference between whether or not you're religious from birth or you are a returnee. Some people feel comfortable with it, with other Bal Teshuvahs. Some people don't. Some people want to forget their past. Some people don't. It's in the fabric of what we become. But deep down, even a Bal Teshuvah that returns, and let's say he largely erases his secular days, in the religious world, he is easily still identifiable. So you can cover your past all you want. When I say past, I'm not talking dirty past. I'm just saying, the fact that you were, let's say now you go by your Hebrew name. Let's just say it's Yochanan, and 10 years ago you were Steve, right? You took on your Hebrew name, and Steve had a persona, and Yochanan has a persona. And some people want to minimize that reality, and some people want to maximize it. Just the very nature that you're even engaged in such a thought process or discussion tells you that you're a Bal Teshuvah. The religious from birth, it's a different walk. They were born into religiosity, most likely never even knew a Gentile. Went to religious schools from the time of kindergarten. It's a very closed society, largely. Now, that Bal Teshuvah, let's rewind the clock 15 years ago, when I'm getting my first inkling to return. Now, when I showed up at my rabbi's office requesting to learn Torah, technically you would have called that kid a Bal Teshuvah. Let's say I was learning for a month, and he says, his wife says, "How was your day?" He would say, "Oh, this nice Bal Teshuvah kid came to learn Torah with me today." So both have the term Bal Teshuvah. But can you really compare me of 15 years ago and me today? I mean, there's no comparison. I knew nothing. I walked in, I was fresh, I was interested, and that's about it. So here too, the Gared Tzedic, even if you wanted to make an argument, the Gared Tzedic term, and it's a sensitive term to converts, we're Gared Tzedic, who are you to take our term? And we've all heard the dance. Which is fine. Okay, you have your claim and you feel your toes have been stepped on. Yet it's the same thing with the Bal Teshuvah. One Gared Tzedic has converted, and he says, I am a Gared Tzedic. So there's another Gared Tzedic who's coming from very far, and like the Bal Teshuvah, he doesn't know if he's going to convert or not. He very well may or may not convert. When I was returning to Judaism, if you would have asked me in my first, even let's say 6 months of my return to Judaism, or religious Judaism, and you'd say, hey, are you going to be frum? Are you going to be a religious guy? I would have told you no. Now, does that mean that you stop calling me a Bal Teshuvah? No, you say, okay, he's a Bal Teshuvah, and he doesn't know where he's going or what he's doing, because frankly, it's not up to him. It's in God's possession to do as God chooses. And the same too with the Ger. God is returning the Ger. You walk with the Ger. It's a return to God, not a return to Judaism. For the Bal Teshuvah and for the Gared Tzedic. And as it was pointed out to me, it's a bit of taunting the Ger to, he's let's say he's returning, he's a Ger, he's even a Gared Tzedic, he's returning, he's invigorated, and you say, hey, when are you going to convert, pal? Hey, when are you going to convert? Well, why would you ask him that all the time? I mean, you certainly don't want people asking you, hey, when are you going to get religious? When are you going to get religious? Let the process happen. If I decide to become Jewish, I become Jewish. If I don't, it means I've chosen to return to God more. And in case you didn't know, a return to God is potentially infinite. Unless you choose to minimize God's greatness, which the Ger is antithetical to doing. The Ger only seeks to glorify God. That's why he is returning, and that is why he's called Gared Tzedic. So just as much as you cannot compare two of Bal Teshuvah, one advanced and one novice, to compare two types of Gared Tzedic is basically ridiculous and irrelevant and not in good health. But it's in perfect good health and very positive and extremely truthful to call anybody who comes from far a Ger Tzedek. And that is in alignment with Rebi Nachman's definition. It's actually funny because last week somebody was passed away who was largely one of the most inspirational sources I've had in my research and quest with the Ger. His name was Rabbi Silver. And I went to his Talmudic class, daily page of Talmud class for years. And we developed a relationship. And even when I was out of yeshiva, we still have talked on the phone about Torah issues that would come up in my life. And as I got involved with Gerim, or Noahides, let's call it, the first thing I did is a lot of people will remember, was the Shem series, which was pretty neutral in terms of provocative nature. It was midrashic literature about Shem, pretty neutral territory. But soon after, everybody wants to know the quintessential question: can we as Gerim keep Shabbat? That was one of the first questions I ever dealt with. And to me, it was very logical. And I'm saying, well, of course you can keep Shabbos. What's the problem with that? And I gave the classic answer, which I have revised my answer these days. I would have said back then, just don't keep it like a Jew, because to keep it like a Jew, you're obligated to die, as one of the prohibitions. But go ahead and do it as you wish. that was my answer then. As we all probably know, a lot of material has come about since then. The very nature to the discussion, and thinking out loud, when Cheshvan does come around after Tishrei, I would like to really start clarifying the Shabbos issues. Just something to think about. Just the shorthand discussion now. The prohibition is 100%, and I use the word 100% rabbinic, which means by the Torah, the Gerim are commanded in Shabbat. It's been not done as a rabbinic prohibition. And the nature of how it's done is a subject of discussion. With that said, the Gerim have a strong desire to keep Shabbat. Not only because it's part of the command, it just is part of the walk of a Gared Tzedic. Takes you to Yevamos 48b, the Ten Commandment discussion. A ger is to rest on Shabbos. That Gemara there uses the term Ger Tzedek. So I called Rabbi Silver, and I said, am I reading this correctly, that a Gared Tzedic is a non-Jew? He says, yes, it is. I said, but we call converts Gared Tzedic. There's really a precedent. I mean, this is way back in the beginning. I had never heard this before. And I said, there's really a precedent to call the infamous Gerim Gared Tzedic? He says, absolutely. And from that moment on, I had the confidence to go and go with this and call the Gerim Gared Tzedic when it applied. So it's interesting because since he passed away, hopefully, let's say a torch has been passed. And his contemporary, another friend of mine from Cleveland, I saw on the street at the beginning of this week. And he asked me what I'm up to. And I told him where we're holding. And we would discuss some Ger topics. I told him I'm interested in the Torah, and he just, he had 2 cents to give. It just aroused some thought. And he said it very, very eloquently when I told him about the Gared Tzedek and Rabbi Silver. And this was his answer. He said it makes sense to call the Gerim, in certain contexts, Gared Tzedek. The rabbis of today have a tradition to simply call converts Gared Tzedek, while the Chazal, the rabbis of old, had a different style of usage of the term Gared Tzedek. And that to me was such a simple, great answer that a guy in the street who has a bit of learning under his belt could hear just how simple the discussion of the Gared Tzedek is. Because it really doesn't need to be this difficult. So when people get emotional responses, the learned individual, or even this one that can think about it for 10 seconds, you see it's very practical and logical and applicable to the Gerim, in particular, to emphasize the tzedek quality, to emphasize that it is a very righteous endeavor to come from very far away into the inner sanctum of holiness. And that's where we're going to go with this week's class. That not only is this, little words like applicable and nice, and it's a gross understatement, even a bit insulting, because the Zohar, what it actually says about the Ger Tzedek, the reason why we're having problems with people when they teach, why is it that the Ten Commandments are taught it's a convert? Why is it in Parshas Re'eh about eating a carcass is given to a convert, and we know 100%, even 110% how wrong that is? The Zohar says the return of the ger. And to understand what that means, its implication, is the absolute hardest thing to comprehend in the Torah. And you can see why it's so hard to comprehend. What are you to me? That's such people's attitude. Why do I need to learn about you? What makes you so important and you so special? I need to go out of my way and learn about you. I'm fielded this question off the blog all the time. Rabbi Katz, it's interesting the work you do with the Ger, but what's with the Ger? Well, I mean, okay, so they're nice people. What do you need to work? Why are you always writing articles on the Ger? And why is it always about the redemption is contingent on the Ger? It's one of those things that if you don't know, it's kind of hard to describe. But it's in the eyes of the many, it just seems to be the most unpractical parts of Judaism. Tell me how to keep Shabbat. Tell me how to keep kosher. Tell me how to be a better Jew. Even, regarding the nations, tell me how to bring peace in the world. But the Ger? The bottom line is he's so difficult to understand because people want to think about themselves and their little ethnic tribes. The Ger is something that's almost impossible to talk about. And then, in fact, let's just say it is impossible to talk about. Because that's how the Zohar describes it. It's such a 100% spiritual entity and representation that there's not much to grab onto to talk about in tangible terms, in definable, tangible terms. This is why King David called himself a Ger. He's saying, I'm so spiritual, I have a hard time really relating to the non-spiritual. You want me to do rituals, jump up and down, crawl through a hoop, whatever it is, as part of your religious doctrine. But mine is really about being close to God, walking with God, doing His commandments from love and faith. I mean, the Ger is a very heartfelt, warm, inner dimension of the Torah. In fact, I'll go on to say it's the inner dimension of the Torah. So this is why it's the hardest thing to understand. And the bad side, this is why when you hear, for example, a lecture given on Rebi Nachman, just for context, chapter Torah's number 14 and 17 in Likutei Moharan. I listened online to some classes, and they butcher the daylights out of it. The Gerim is called the guy that's not religious, right? The Jew who's very far away. We have to go out and convert people. These are all things you'll hear. So especially when you're not privy to the Hebrew and you're following, let's say, a lecture, the happy Ger comes along, hearing some Torah. The disadvantage is astronomical. And that's another reason why the redemption of the Ger is so important. Because all these people are doing everything in their power to not explain what you are about. It's always not you. It's a convert or it's a Jew who's far away. It's not you. So all the time we're hearing the Torah about these bad Jews who are not religious, they're far away, these bad converts, all these negative terms. Yet the positive bright spot in your teaching was very right in front of you if you would just understand what the Ger is about. That's why it's been covered up for so long. So now let's get into a little bit about Rebi Nachman's Ger, i.e. the Gared Tzedic. Because we've been teaching the technical end for a while and researching the Tanakh value. Another thought of going into Cheshvan, the month of Cheshvan, I want to start getting into the last 500 years of more philosophical or Hasidic Torah to understand the Ger in context of later authorities on a more spiritual level. So Rebi Nachman then says the rectification of all of the Torah is contingent on the Ger. So here we're gonna start to put some definable terms. Why does the Ger matter? Why does he matter? Who is he? Give me something to latch on to. Now, there's something called the Mizbeach. I'm sure many people are aware of the Mizbeach. It's the altar of offerings in the Beis HaMikdash courtyard. The temple has been destroyed. We know that. But there's the spiritual level of the altar. It's the domain of, let's call it, in the most upper world, it's the seat of all rectification, Malchus of Atzilus, the vessel to receive Hashem's light of revelation on high. And that same level is the domain of the world to come. It's simultaneously Keter of Bria, the highest level of the world to come, the world of Bria creation. It's where the two worlds unite. That level is called the Mizbeach. That's when the temple is on high, that's where the Mizbeach power is revealed. So Rebi Nachman says something very simple. The Gerim, their job is to rectify the Mizbeach, which is essentially complete the temple, bring the temple down, restore intellect in the Torah. It's like a big catchphrase for the essence of all labors in Torah. Why the Mizbeach? Because if there's no idolatry in the world, the Mizbeach is offering to God. No problems. While there is idolatry, there's a blemish on the altar. Meaning maybe there's another altar. Maybe there's an altar to pagan gods. So when the Gerim have come from far, there's no more Akum in the world. Guess what you've done? You have eliminated idolatry. You have sanctified God's table. There's no more eating of idolatry in the world. Symbolic of the Mizbeach. That's the power of what the Gerim are to restore. So when the Gerim come from afar and they're Ger Tzedek, they're bringing all the sparks of holiness scattered around the universe. The altar is restored. The temple is restored. The temple can come to earth. And the Torah has reached its prime directive. And we've already explained how the Bal Teshuvah is different or in comparison with the Gared Tzedic. Now, in Rebi Nachman's Torah, he compares the proverbial Gerim with Bal Teshuvah. He says the Gerim and the Bal Teshuvah. Now, the argument against this, the Gerim being Gerim, as we know them, Gerim non-Jews, how can we prove that the Gerim he refers to are non-Jews instead of converts? Very simple answer. Once a Ger has returned, and he's returned to the point where he says, "Man, you know what? I thought I was a non-Jew, but in my heart, I believe I am Jewish. In fact, I'm going to convert. I realize now that the path and journey to God was indeed coupled with a return to Judaism. I mean, I am a fish out of water. I need to be a practicing Jew to complement my return." At that moment, you're really not functioning as a Ger Tzedek. You're functioning as a Bal Teshuvah Ger Tzedek. You are returning as a returnee to Judaism. This is based on the individual's perspective. So Rebi Nachman would call you a Bal Teshuvah. He would not call you a Ger. A Ger, by definition of Rebi Nachman, is that you are returning from Akum, meaning you are rejecting idolatry and improper non-Jewish behavior in the world, and you're returning on a path of Gared Tzedic to Hashem. Thus, to call the Gerim here converts is not really applicable. And he quotes the Zohar. The Zohar he quotes is Parshas Lech Lecha. Now, we've had discussions in the past about a verse in the Navi about a biri leiv rachok mitzedakah, the strong-hearted called a biri leiv, who are very distant from charity or acts of righteousness. This is also in conjunction with stealing prohibition and Shabbat prohibition. And the Gerim who are found in the Gerim community in the times of the Babylonian Talmud called Maksamexia. It was a Ger community where the Jews and Gerim got very close, and exile was strengthened due to that interaction. The Zohar then describes as Abraham coming back and returning from the Abiri Leiv. Now, Abraham made Gerim, and Abraham was not a Jew. There were no Jews at the time. Abraham was making Ger here of non-converts. It's very interesting because the Zohar uses two terminology to describe what Abraham was returning away from. The Rasha and the Chayiv. Those who are, let's say, guilty in the court of law, and those who are wicked. So the basic teaching on this that people will tell you, and particularly in conjunction with Rebi Nachman, these are Jews. They're wicked for they're not keeping the Torah. They're very far away, and it's like they're chayiv. They're obligated in all these penalties. But you look at the Zohar inside; it's very clear this is a non-Jewish discussion. Abraham is seen to pull people from very far from idolatrous ways, make them Gerim. There's never a Jew in the discussion. So all of the resources Rebi Nachman brings are Gerim non-Jews, which gives you context again. The more sources we have that are definable as non-Jews, then you learn the vernacular of who's the Ger or who's the non-Ger. Meaning the Ger is turning away from evil deeds. Now, why is it evil deeds? Because to turn and walk with the Shekhinah is the opposite of evil. Tzedek is the opposite of Rasha. To desecrate the name of God in the world is the opposite to sanctify God's name in the world. And what about the obligation, or let's say the prohibition obligation? The Akum, he is obligated many times over of transgression of the 7 laws of Noah. The Gared Tzedic finds himself in non-chayiv terminology. Meaning there's justice, there's mishpat. What do we say in prayer? Shem ohed tzedakah mishpat. He loves righteousness and justice. Killing a bunch of non-Jews for infringement on the 7 laws, that's not justice. That's just taking care of business because the world wants to be idolatrous. Justice is when a Gared Tzedic commits a crime, God forbid, he gets the proper punishment. And capital offense is not that punishment in 3 out of the 7 commandments. Okay, murder is capital, but that's the same for a Jew. That's universal law. You kill somebody, you pay for your life. However, stealing is not capital. The more Gared Tzedic one becomes and acquainted with Beis Din, then we get to say Hashem loves a Tzedakah Mishpat. So all the true Gerim, the whole world is seen as a potential playground for Gerim. When we make it our business, Jews and Gerim together, to bring the world away from Akum into the Ger mentality, that is the most difficult thing in the world to understand. And we know why. And it's also the greatest honor to God's name. You will have done no greater honor to God, which is why Abraham was so great. He did the hardest thing possible. Now, mind you, he was inspired by another man who did this as well. And there's a reason why we don't say he did the greatest, most difficult thing in the Torah. His name is Shem, the son of Noah. And you'll say, oh, you see, Abraham's greater than Shem because Abraham made Gerim, and we say how great Abraham is, and we never say that about Shem. The fact is, we cannot say it about Shem. You never will. And the answer is a very good answer. Why? Says the Zohar again. Why is it the greatest honor to bring back Gerim and to return people to Hashem? And our boy Abraham, he did it, nobody else did. Go Jews, don't go Noahites. Jews win. No, poor context yet again. Abraham is quite simply a Ger Tzedek. So the Jewish equation is out. And the reason why you don't say Shem is because, get this is amazing. When a person returns Gerim from very far away, you merit revelation of Shem. That's why there's no such thing as Shem doing a great deed. Shem is the great deed. Abraham merited a revelation of Shem, hence Melchizedek on the Temple Mount with Abraham. Shem's part of the equation in the DNA. It's undercutting Shem to say, was he also applicable to bring back Gerim? Shem is part of the program. And I'll even throw you a bone on this one. The famous thing, if Noah was alive in the time of Abraham, would Noah be as great or greater or not as great as Abraham? I realize that if making a Ger Tzedek is revelation of Shem, then what would happen is when Abraham makes Gerim, let's say not Tzedek, just people that reject idolatry, would that constitute a revelation of Noah? Meaning, would there be, just like revelation of Shem, is there a revelation of Noah in the time of Abraham? Would they want only the revelation of Shem, or would there also be a revelation of Noah? I.e. the 7 laws versus Ger Tzedek. And to continue. So there's a revelation of Shem Melchizedek. That's part of the Abraham program, of the most difficult and most honorable faction of Torah, bringing back those that are far away and making Ger Tzedek. Thus, you find it's a practice. It's a known Torah practice of the highest order to be involved with the Ger Tzedek. So again, the sensitivity and don't call me that, you're stealing my title, all the things we've heard. Just know that person against this is negating the essential levels of greatness in the Torah. That's how hard-headed we have to be to get the message of the Ger Tzedek out. Because it is the ultimate honor of God. It is the hardest thing to understand in the Torah. It does complete the temple's altar. It does eradicate idolatry. It does facilitate and hasten the redemption. It does explain Abraham and therefore the forefathers and all of Bereshis in proper context. The list goes on and on and on. So why is it so hard? Why in the world is this so hard? Look in the Torah. What happened after Adam named the animals? Hashem puts them under a deep sleep, and he brings Eve to Adam. What happens to Abraham just after he is acknowledged as having tzedakah, and he fights the kings? There's revelation of Shem. He makes a mistake. He doesn't make an acquisition on his awakeness, and Hashem puts him to sleep. Sinai, you've come out of Egypt. Here we are. You're going to get the revelation of Torah. What does Hashem do? Boker Tov, go to sleep. The only time in history that we have an awake state, we can assume Abraham merited it with Shem. And last week's Parshas Kisavo, Hashem says, today your eyes are open in this covenant. Meaning the covenant that happened in the land of Moab before Israel and the Gerim entered into Israel. The sleep that we're talking about is a spell from Hashem. Call it the ego. Call it my own little world. Call it the misconstrued conception or perception of our names. Think about when you're called by your name. If you can kind of detach from it and hear it from an objective point of view. And you can even say your name and you hear it. If you think about it long enough, your name doesn't make sense. It's just kind of, what is it? We know certain words. How words have a certain a resonance. A book. A book is a book. A clock. A clock is a clock. Table. But what is a David? It's very strange to hear. I am a David. I am David. It's just strange. So because it's strange, and we have a consciousness placed on us from God, we have a certain resonance and relationship to our name. So when people say your name in a derogatory tone, in a mocking tone, praiseworthy tone, you start to get a vibe of who this character is. And what it is that God calls you by your name. So there's always a theme. So let's pick on Joe here for a minute. Sorry, Joe. But God calls Joe, Joe. God calls all of us by our names. And Joe has a mazal unique to him. It's where his soul is. It's where he is. It's Joe's world. So let's say God has 100 different versions of calling people by their names. Obviously, it's infinite, but for argument's sake, let's call it 100. So Joe has 1 out of 100 styles of name. Let's say everyone that talks to Joe speaks from love. Joe's a really great guy, which he is, and everyone loves him. They say, hey, Joe. Hey, Joe, how's it going, man? Joe. And all day long, Joe hears terms of endearment. So you start to get this, man, people really love me. Now, let's say Joe's unrectified, and he has a bit of an ego, which hopefully he doesn't, but, he's a human. And there is a sitra achra, there's another side, and somebody doesn't like Joe. Somebody says, Joe, a scolding rebuke. How are you going to feel? All of a sudden, where's the term of endearment? You can't do that to me. I am the Joe program. People love me. That's how we all are with our names. In the small scale, but really, we're all used to a certain majority vibe that we get by the people tend to call us even on first contact. Let's say I'm working in a store and my name tag says David. Let's say that 90% of the people will say Davo. And that's my mazel. I'm Davo. So that becomes me. I'm the Davo guy. Hey, I'm Davo. So when you mock me, and you say, hey, it's Devo, I get upset. I have an ego. I'm unrectified. See, that's the world. This is how we have self-conscious behavior. With that said, you become very compartmentalized, even if your name is praiseworthy, but you become you. There is a proper you. Instead of breathing the awareness of God, which is the point of the Torah, Adam came from the ground, Adamah. He had to not be Adam. Especially when God is naming you Adam, imagine how you feel. God named me Adam. So you become very much in your world. And he did. Eve recognizes him as the Adam program. I mean, Adam is a unique name because it resonates very nicely. I mean, I don't know if you guys at home want to say, but say to yourself, Adam. It's a nice name. It's a very nice name. So you're going to be very strong in your belief of being an Adam. But that was the test. The test was to realize Adam is a false program. It's just what God calls you. You need to understand what the powers of that name are, and to have ego or attachment is to diminish or to limit the power of God, the Mazal in you. So what does Adam do? He becomes the Adam program. I mean, Adam means man, so if there's ever a man program, there it is. There's your alpha male man number one. Hey, I'm the man. And Eve says, you are the man. And God made you, you are man. And that was their downfall. They're thinking in terms of ego. I am going to bring Mashiach. I am going to repair the garden. I am working the Garden of Eden. I. And that makes them cunning. I know how. I'll do it even better. That is the eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They are tasting sin. They did taste sin. They make leaves for themselves. Why? Separation of gender. We should have society and structure in our garden. Which is not bad, but it's about, you are you, I am me. We correspond by these rules of conduct. It wasn't a society of God. So God came and said, hey, what are you doing? He says, man, I'm afraid because I'm cunning. Hebrew cunning and naked are the same word, arum. And then from that exile happened, the spell of God took over Adam. The Gerim were to come, the proverbial Gerim, were to come to the garden from Adam being present in the moment, not going out yonder looking around. It says in the Rizal, Adam sinned with the power of the Erev Rav. Instead of allowing Gerim to exist in the garden, he created the power of the Erev Rav. Abraham also, he becomes the Ger Toshav, Ger Tzedek, merits Shem, Hashem tests him, could not break the spell. Sinai becomes a Jewish spell. The Ger, though, is very unique. He's rejected idolatry. He's not Jewish. He's not connected to Adam. He's the good part of Noah called Toldus Noach, meaning the righteousness of Noah, the best part of Abraham. He's not Jewish yet, so he's not selling himself short to plug himself back in the matrix. His Sinai is the essence of what Jethro represented. Rather than Jethro leaving, he's Jethro staying in revelation of Mashiach. Meaning it's all good for the Ger. The Ger has a status of eyes open. That is the repair of Adam. Thus the Ger now in his vacuum, which is a world of limitless possibility, needs to get this message out to a world of people who are asleep. Hence, it is a very tedious and great task of a job. The hardest thing to do, to find this guy who, when on our world of duality, he is in unity, he needs to wake people up in duality, get the message out, and send the SOS. It's a rescue mission. Because he has found the world to come, and he wants to populate it. But when you are in unity, the world's in duality, duality will kill to remain in duality and stay asleep. We all know that. Go tell a convert a Gared Tzedic is a non-Jew, he'll flip. Don't you step between me and my duality, pal. That is the honor of God at hand. That is how hard it is. People are asleep. They see the Ger, they make it up in their head. He's a Russia. He's a not religious Jew. He's very far away Jew. When you wake up and you realize the Ger, you see the world as Jewish and Ger. You see the fabric of reality. So when you read Parshas Kisavo and all the curses and blessings, and you realize, man, this is the truth. What is a convert even? The reason why converts are called Gerim is because really they are Gerim. Why is the Torah never clear when it says Gerim? Why is it always this, well, it's a convert till you look it up, it's a Ger Toshav, it's in this case, in that case, because really, underneath the covers, there's just one kind of Ger. Until Mashiach comes, and there's a temple, and the Gerim and the converts can bring their offering to that rectified altar, i.e. until the Jews crossed over the land of Israel and took on their commandments and built the temple and making it eternal, everyone is just a Ger. So let's say the Jews cross over, become obligated in 613, they have converted. When a convert is to convert, he has to take on those extra commandments. There must be a going over into Israel, and going to Crown Heights doesn't cut it. So we say that the Gared Tzedic is an IOU. He's good for it. Here's your receipt. Should Mashiach come in your lifetime, you're good for it. It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, yes. On one hand, no. And for the Ruth program, we say probably yes. The nature of a convert is when someone is returning, they really want to be Jewish, blah, 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 they get revelation of Ruth. Meaning the partner amongst them says, man, you are Jewish. And the IOU is basically witnessed and signed and vouched for. But yet it is still an IOU. So the discrepancy of the Ger Tzedek is to say, don't you mock my IOU. But understand, it's an IOU. Just like a marriage agreement, we put a ketubah up on the wall. Has everybody ever heard of it? Does everyone know what a ketubah is? You go to a Jewish home, the marriage contract is hanging up on the wall. That contract is not a love affair. All it does is state how much money he gives his wife should there be a divorce. Do you realize that? These people are framing their ketubah. Look, honey, if we divorce tomorrow, you owe me 200 zuz. It's absolutely ironic. The most degrading part of the marriage has become the point where we glorify and hang on our wall. So the same thing with the convert. To say he's a Gared Tzedic, he is glorifying, this is my contract to bring an offering to the temple. It means there's still yet a process. There is still something to do while there's no temple, no Israel. Now, granted, we have the Ruth moment. Everyone, whether you're a Ger and remain non-Jewish or you convert, there's always a level of the Ger Rachav moment. When the Rachav moment is when you become Gared Tzedic, the Ruth moment you become the, let's call it, cross into Judaism level of Tiferet. And based on where you want to go. With that said, the ambiguous nature in the Torah of the Ger is because really there's only one need for the term. When one properly becomes Jewish, Judaism is Judaism and non-Judaism is non-Judaism. And only with eyes wide open can we see the equation clearly. Only with eyes wide open can you understand how together the Jews and Gerim really are, what the interactions are, what the Torah is saying, what rabbinic commandments are coming to do, why there's a commandment, again, Shabbos for the non-Jew. you get a scope of history. The vantage point of the Ger allows us to see society in such terms. And you can appreciate then how difficult it is and how much of an honor to God it is to make it to that viewpoint to see the ultimate truth. Because in the world of duality, everything is basically has a big band-aid put over it. Right? Those that are far away, those are just Jews who are not religious. It's very hard to vouch for the Ger and what the Ger represents when we have a type of trance put over us. And that was and is Adam's task, was to wake up out of ego. It's somebody far away is a Jew that's not doing the commandments. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not an ego issue. Again, the honor of God and the great level of difficulty is because the nature of the rectification of Adam and the altar of the temple. To see reality from a point of unity, a universal message, and not from duality in an egotistical point of view. Adam was to basically bring Gerim into his garden and not Erev Rav. Erev Rav would say, bring in a bunch of bad Jews, those that are far away and they're bad, as opposed to Gerim, who, it's good to be here. So the Zohar says that there are 3 pluses to bringing back the Gerim. When you achieve this level of difficulty, when you achieve what Abraham and Shem did, then what you do is you raise the honor of God to its location, the altar of the temple, the place of fearing God, the place where Mazel and Torah are one, where the world becomes spiritual. You suppress the Sitra Achra, and you unite heaven and earth. That's the unification of the world in Tzilos and Bria. You bring the world to come. You repair Moses hitting the rocks. You elevate the ark of God into its proper domain above, revelation of God above the 2 Kruvim. You bring the Spirit of God into the world. The absolute essence of the Torah. Bringing the world into the world to come through the Gog v'Magog by emphasizing Mazal in man, knowledge of name, suppression of ego, the loss of the trance, the ability to see clearly, and ultimately the ability to appreciate what the rabbis have done and what the Torah has done, all for the sake of heaven, and understand history in proper context. In closing, Rebi Nachman's Torah talks about Pinchas, the ultimate Kohen, the Kohen Tzedek, and the Gared Tzedic. The reason what Pinchas represents is tefillah, prayer. That through prayer and a connection to the altar of the temple is that when there are no offerings in the temple, when that Ger situation has that IOU, then prayer is what elevates all offerings. And when the Kohen like Pinchas prays and connects it to the altar, that all the prayers of 2,000 years of Gerim and Jews who have been uttering prayers of Gerim go up at one time. And that's what facilitates the redemption. And it goes back, I'll end with this. Mashiach ben Yosef is decreed death. And it starts right at home with Shem and Abraham. Abraham was blessed to be the high priest by Shem. But he was married to a Shifcha, Hagar, which, by the way, the letters spell Hagar, coincidentally enough. And it's wrong. It was wrong what he did. Because Abraham was not meant to be a high priest with a Shifcha. Thereby it came out there was an Ishmael, there was an Esav, there's a Yerva ben Nevat, Mashiach ben Yosef has to die. Then we say that Hashem's not going to kill Mashiach ben Yosef. There's a decree that Beniyahu ben Yehoyada has the Yechida level that will fight to save him. Mashiach ben Yosef wins, fine. But there must be a repair. And the repair is Shem gave over the high priesthood to Abraham. What he should have given over was not the high priesthood, but what's called the Kohen Mashiach. The priesthood who administers to Mashiach. They're the ministers that cater and administer to the ark. And there are ministers who minister to God, who functions as Mashiach under the dictum, Ein Mashiach b'Yisrael. There's no Messiah for Israel outside of Hashem. And there are Kohanim, like Pinchas and Abraham in his adjusted format, who administer to that revelation of God. It's called Kohen Mashiach. Had Shem given over the Kohen Mashiach blessing and not the Kohen Gadol blessing, that actually would have manifested the revelation of Mashiach. There would have been no Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben Yosef, when he's not dying, he's living. And when he's living, then immediately it's called Mashiach ben David. And that was what Shem had in mind, was a transfer of Mashiach ben David into the seed of Abraham. And the repair is when we go back to Adam in the garden and think not to declare, pronounce, or search for Mashiach, because that is by definition Mashiach ben Yosef, and that kills him. To stay local and cater to the presence wherever we are, to be the Kohen Mashiach, and the Gerim are called Kohen Gadol. But the Kohen Gadol on the side of Kohen Mashiach, to administer to the revelation of Mashiach that we're all privy to. Just like the ark, we can all administer on this level. Israel's a kingdom of priests. The Gerim are Kohanim Gadol, and they learn the Torah, Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Mashiach. Now, where do we get this? In the first temple, it was the Kohen Gadol, who was also the Kohen Mashiach. The second temple, it was actually the Kohen Gadol was not the Kohen Mashiach. So you have the first and second temples define two types of Kohen Gadol. There's one that's anointed with oil, and one that's anointed with clothes. And the oil is synonymous with land. He who is anointed by the land or the temple, and he who is anointed by clothes. The first and second temple then come into the third temple, and there's where you have your Gerim. The guy who goes in the Holy of Holies is anointed by clothes. That's a Kohen Gadol. But the Kohen Gadol who's anointed by the temple itself, i.e. the offering of the altar itself, he is called the Kohen Mashiach. He administers the revelation of Mashiach. That is out of the trance. That is unity and not duality. That is removing the slumber to understand what the Ger is about. That is the pathway to see into the Ger. That is the redemption of the Ger by God. Those that administer to the revelation of the Mashiach will be drawn to the place of the Mashiach. That will usher the redemption. And that is through the Gerim and the Gerim only, namely the Ger Tzedek. As the Zohar says, it is the most difficult and honorable thing we can do. And the Gerim represent for all of time the eyes open just like Jethro to see the vision and to not be confused by multiple terminology and confrontational terminology, but to simply understand what is written and what is said, and to know what it means, and to go with it because we connect to it. This is Gared 17, the Gared Tzedic. I forget what we called it, the Gared Tzedic in depth. Have a great holiday season. See everybody in the month of Cheshvan. Shabbat Shalom towards the end of the week. Good holidays. See everyone in Cheshvan. Thank you.